Hi, my name is Mike, and I currently work as an educator in a high school. I also work as a health coach and a yoga instructor, and also a kids jujitsu coach as well. I've done a bunch of things in my life, but what I really enjoy most is teaching and coaching. And I really think that that boils down to learning in general, my passion for learning. The name of my podcast is the Heuristic Podcast. And I launched it with the help of the Minotaur Podcast Projectile Programme by Zulfikar. He was a big help. I was in contact with him before. I met him on Twitter, but when I found out that he was running this program, I knew that it was immediately for me. I liked him as a person, and the way that he presented it and how he presented himself immediately drew me to what he was working on and where I thought he could take me. So Zulfikar and the Minotaur Podcast Projectile Program was a massive help in me launching my podcast, which is, again, the Heuristic Podcast. My gut instinct was that it was going to help me. I knew that almost anything would help me, but yours, not yours, but it is yours. The Minotaur Podcast Projectile Program, I knew would help me specifically because of what you were trying to focus on, which is self-improvement, ultimately. I knew that what was limiting me from creating my own podcast, or maybe starting or taking the first few steps of my own or on my own, was maybe self-limiting beliefs, lack of self-esteem in certain cases, and unclear of which steps to take. So your focus on self-improvement and what you've created with the Minotaur Podcast Projectile Program is perfect for someone like me who is looking to go deeper and also establish or create some way of expressing yourself. The impact on my self-esteem, I would say this 100% boosted my self-esteem. It proved that I can do something, and it proved to myself that I can get uncomfortable and choose to get uncomfortable in order to grow. So this was definitely a boost to my self-esteem and my confidence. The way that it improved my confidence is just reestablishing to go after things that make me uncomfortable, but also that I feel my heart pulling me towards, and that I know to be something that I'm genuinely interested in. So I would say that, again, being a part of the Minotaur Podcast Projectile Program definitely helped me take the first few steps that I might have lacked the confidence to do. So it definitely reaffirmed that I can continue to get uncomfortable in order to grow as a person and in different creative endeavors. One of the biggest impacts on my life, or one of the biggest impacts that creating the podcast with this program has done for me so far, is it's continued, or it's expanded my my love for conversation. It's given me another outlet to have deep conversations, and conversations that I think to be important with people that I find to be interesting. So that's something that I've always been interested in. That's something that I've always loved to do. So I think that that alone will be one of the greatest decisions of my life, which then in turn results, or it stems from me starting this podcast. And this podcast will be a medium for having those conversations and allowing others to be a part of those conversations too. Additional wins that I've gotten from this program, and at least starting the podcast, have been connecting with people that I normally wouldn't have in the past about topics that I normally wouldn't have. So ultimately, what I'm doing on the podcast is having conversations that I love having. And if I could have more of those in my real life with people that I'm involved with in my day-to-day, that's one of my favorite things to do. So that's definitely been one of the additional wins. It's gotten people interested in talking about things that they might not have known that I was interested in before listening to an episode of my podcast. So that's been a major win for me personally and socially. I've also gotten in touch with a few people on the internet that I've listened to episodes, and that's also been reassuring. And that's nice to see that other people also like those same kind of conversations, and they like to work on that same kind of stuff. I think the greatest fear that I had to overcome with podcasting was being recorded and hearing back my own voice, hearing the amount of recognizing when I wasn't in the moment. I think it's the same fear as public speaking or something like that, or to a degree. It's a little different because when you're publicly speaking, you know that you have a lot of eyes on you. And when you're being recorded, it's just imaginary eyes, but it still gets you in your head and it takes you out of the moment. So I think just being okay with seeing myself be uncomfortable and watch that play out over time and understand that other people are going to be exposed to that was one of the greatest fears I had to overcome. And I'm still working on that, but this is definitely a great way for me to work on that and get over it. And I know that I will over time. So then when you think about the compounding effect that has on my life over, the next few decades, that's something that you can't even put a monetary value on. So that alone was worth starting the podcast. The Minotaur Podcast Projectile Program did help me overcome this fear because it forced me to get uncomfortable in a way that I was also creatively interested in. So if I wasn't interested in creating a podcast and having conversations with interesting people, I don't know if I would have taken the necessary steps, even with the framework that I was provided through this program, which was phenomenal. I don't know if I would have had it in me to take the steps to really get uncomfortable and choose to do so myself. So having the program make or provide clear-cut steps definitely helped with that. So it was the perfect match for someone like me. It's hard to pick out one thing with the program that helped me the most, because I did enjoy all the aspects of it. But if I had to pick one, I would say the one-on-one calls with Zulfikar. He was extremely thorough, very attentive, very curious about what you were doing and wanted to know if you had any questions or what you were struggling on or with. He's great at individualizing it for you based on your fears and challenges. So me working as a special education teacher and focusing on individualizing education for students, someone like myself, I really do appreciate that kind of attention to detail that he provided in those one-on-one calls. And for someone like myself, I enjoy being a part of a group, and I enjoyed being a part of this group too. But someone like myself, I do really well with one-on-one focus like that. So I would have to say that the greatest impact for me, or the things that helped me out the most, were those one-on-one calls that Zulfikar was always more than willing to schedule and get on with me, even being in completely different parts of the world. We're on a 5-hour time difference, and he would go out of his way to try to schedule things that would work for the two of us. So something like that was definitely a great help. The structure of the program was very clear, very concise. It was broken up into, week modules. The goals for each week were clearly stated. The materials were provided ahead of time for you to get a look at. We would meet in group calls. If you were able to attend, then Zulfikar, like I said, would have his one-on-one calls with you. You had tasks to work on throughout the week, things to, build that have to do with your podcast, and also learning about what other people are doing with their podcast. So it was a good mixture of group and individual work. Me personally, I could have taken more advantage of the group work on that was held on Facebook this go around. I just had other things going on too that stopped me from always being able to attend those. But I could have benefited more from the group work if I was able to attend personally. And the materials that Zulfikar provided were excellent. Again, coming from someone who works as a teacher, I pay a lot of attention to the materials being given and stuff like this. And he was as clear as one could be. Very thorough, provided examples, models, a clear skeleton and framework for anyone making a podcast about anything to follow. So I would say A+. So Zulfikar's support and accountability were excellent. He made me feel like he was in the process with me, which he was. He was involved. He was always, a DM or a text away. He was also good at, pushing you when he felt that you might be slacking or, maybe not pushing yourself a little bit. So he would get to know you well enough to be able to try to, coax you or, prompt you or encourage you or build you up in a way that would work to, try to get you going and try to keep you accountable. He was great at setting dates. He, at one point in the program, he encourages people to set a launch date so that you have something to work for and work towards and keep you accountable. So the accountability aspect of it was helpful for me and definitely encouraged me to stay on task throughout the process, because there were times when I would fall behind and, I would have to catch up. So that definitely was integral. My thoughts on the coaching knowledge and the business / marketing aspect. This the marketing and the advertising aspect of it is something that I struggled with the most, but I think that's because that's my own personal difficulty. It wasn't for a lack of something that Zulfikar wasn't providing. It was definitely on my side. That's one of my greatest challenges is trying to sell something or sell myself. That's something I'm still trying to figure out. So I would say the material and what I received and the how-to on that was great. I just didn't feel totally ready to do it in a way that felt right for me. I'm still trying to figure that out. So I would say that was definitely on me. So I've bought a few high ticket, I don't know if I would call them programs or certifications, which I have. My health coaching certification was quite expensive, and my yoga teacher certification was quite expensive. And that's not including other forms of education, including my master's and undergrad. But if I'm just including or taking into consideration most recently what I spent money on, which was my health coaching certification and my yoga teacher certification, I would say that, this coaching program would definitely equal the value that I received in those. Because what this program helped me do was to create or put together my own creative outlet. And like I said, at one point, to be able to help someone to create or, establish a creative outlet for themselves, you can't put a monetary value on that. So it's hard for me to even put a top price tag on what I would pay for a service like Zulfikar's. And now that I see exactly what I'm doing and what the potential is, yeah, so it's definitely worth the money. With my podcast, I plan on using it to continue to learn. I'm extremely curious about a lot, so I plan on having a ton of conversations that I'm interested in having. I love meeting new people, making connections, so I'll see where that takes me. But I would like to, for now, just use the podcast as that, and maybe in the future I could use it to help support my health coaching and yoga business. I'm very happy with this program. I would give it a 10 out of 10. And I'm forever grateful to Zulfikar and his willingness to work with me throughout the process. I'm really excited to see where my podcast goes. I was telling someone recently that it's something that I already feel like I have to take care of. It feels like, a kid to a degree that I have to care for and foster, and just see where it grows, because it almost feels like it has a mind of its own that I'm just trying to water. So yeah, I'm very excited to see where this goes, and I would definitely recommend the Minotaur Projectile Podcasting Program, 100%.